PTV, Telebisyon ng Bayan.
Thank you very much and good afternoon to you all. I just want to report to you very briefly on the results of today's meeting of the ASEAN senior officials. This is the first senior officials meeting under the Philippine chairmanship of ASEAN. And it was held throughout basically the whole day. And much of the discussion was on various issues in preparation for the ASEAN Foreign Ministers Retreat, as well as a number of other issues which I can go into more brief detail a bit later. But just let me say at the outset of the meeting, the Philippines briefed our ASEAN colleagues, senior officials, on the Philippine priorities during our chairmanship for 2017, our basic thematic priorities, as well as our various objectives to be achieved under some of those priorities. During the meeting itself, of course, as I said, we discussed preparations for the foreign ministers' meeting, as well as a number of other issues. These ranged on broad matters such as ASEAN community building, and this covered a broad range of issues. We also dealt on matters pertaining to the conduct of the ASEAN summits. We also discussed issues relating to external relations, as well as meetings, for example, the East Asia Summit and the ARF, particularly the conduct of those meetings. We also discussed a number of issues related to the milestone anniversaries. As you know, this is not only the 50th anniversary of ASEAN, but it's also, during the year, we'll also commemorate a number of dialogue anniversaries. For example, with Canada, even with APT, the ASEAN +3, with India. So a number of countries or dialogue partners with ASEAN. We are commemorating a number of anniversary years. So we discussed those, also anniversary commemorative activities with the United States and EU. We also discussed a number of issues relating to the other matters, such as the East Asia Summit, issues related to that. We discussed ASEAN member states' candidatures to many international organizations, as well as we went over in detail the ASEAN calendar of events for 2017. We actually discussed quite a number of issues really relating to the work of the ASEAN and the conduct of a number of ASEAN activities. We would call these mainly what you'd call housekeeping issues, putting into order a number of matters which will have to be addressed during the course of the year. So that really consists of a number of broad issues and also a wide-ranging number of issues. So as I have limited time, perhaps I'll stop there. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them if I can, just to alert you that though I do have limited time. So please, if you could make your questions very brief, and I'll see how I can also answer them just as briefly.
Okay, may we hear from Christian of ABS.
Sir, good afternoon. It's been 2002 since China and ASEAN came up with this declaration on the conduct of parties. Now, since 2002, a lot has changed on the ground, especially with the Chinese activities in the disputed areas. Now, how would the so-called changes in the facts on the ground affect ongoing discussions on the framework code of conduct? For example, are the parties involved more emboldened to come up with a framework that could lead to a legally binding code of conduct, or are there certain parties within ASEAN that are actually discouraged or might be thinking that it might turn out to be moot and academic given China's activities in the region?
Well, first of all, the ASEAN is united on coming up with a code of conduct on the South China Sea. ASEAN is also united on the full and effective implementation of the declaration, or the DOC. So there is no change in the ASEAN position. I think the newest development is our aspiration to be coming up with a framework for the code of conduct, hopefully by this year. And this is a hope and position of ASEAN, as well as, I believe, China. Even China has mentioned the importance of coming up with a framework. So we will be busy preparing for, as a first step, coming up or negotiating or discussing a framework for the code of conduct. And this will be a discussion amongst the ASEAN countries and China. So I think, on the contrary, there's more determination now to proceed and try and finalize a code of conduct, perhaps through coming up with a framework as soon as possible, and then proceeding to hopefully actual negotiations on a code of conduct. So work is expected to be even more intense this year.
Sir, one follow-up. Is there a specific discussion, at least on the framework level, to address the militarization activities of China?
Well, that could be subsumed under areas such as in the DOC. We haven't discussed yet the elements of a framework, but there are already many thoughts and ideas of what could come in it. And of course, in the DOC, for example, there already is language where countries would refrain from activities which would tend to escalate tensions in the region. And I think that already would cover some of those points. So I believe that those are issues which will probably be involved in any negotiation on a framework. And I'm quite sure that all those factors would be taken into account by all the countries concerned.
Okay, from Jonah.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Jonah from Asahi Shimbun. Was there any discussion about the assassination of Kim Jong-un's brother in Malaysia? Did the Malaysians brief the rest of ASEAN on what their country has been doing, to try to resolve or smoothen out the relations with DPRK, and how does this impact on the regional security?
There was no discussion.
Okay. Next question, please. Cliff. Cliff. The mic, please.
Sir, sorry, just a follow-up. How about on the Philippine side? Are we at least, or are we at all concerned that agents of a dialogue partner, initiated or executed killing in a country that is a member of ASEAN?
I said that wasn't discussed this afternoon. And we'll probably have to see whether it might be raised during the foreign ministers meeting tomorrow.
Then the Philippines does not have any opinion on it at this moment.
The issue wasn't discussed this afternoon.
Okay, thank you. Cliff.
Sir, good afternoon. My name is Cliff Benson from Nikkei. I have two questions. The first one about the framework code of conduct. Sir, can you tell us what will it look like the scope and limitation of this framework? And then number two, sir, can you brief us on the discussion about economic cooperation or the economic concerns of the of your counterparts?
Well, I think that on the issue of the framework, as I said, that's still going to have to be discussed. But we can already assume that it would include many elements maybe already mentioned in the DOC, as well as some other issues which have been discussed throughout the years on what a code of conduct should look like. But remember, we're only going to be looking first at the framework, which is basically the outline of a code. So it would presumably include many issues which would have a bearing on a code of conduct. So I think it might be premature to come up with any specific elements at this stage, because this still has to be discussed amongst ASEAN and then also with China. So, but just to say that the elements in a framework would naturally have to fall in such a way that it would form the basis of having a code of conduct. In what sense?
Use the mic, please, Cliff.
Other senior officials who mentioned about stepping up or accelerating any deals like RCEP, since ASEAN is involved with RCEP, or any intra or sub-regional trade agreements.
That particular point wasn't discussed by the senior officials today, but I suspect perhaps our senior economic officials would have a lot to say on that.
Thank you. Yan?
Good afternoon, USec. I'm Yan from Phoenix TV Hong Kong. I'm also going to be asking about the effect of recent developments in the South China Sea on your discussion of a framework agreement. So, do you think recent events, specifically the deployment of U.S. warships at this point to patrol the said area, have an impact on your discussions?
Well, I wouldn't say that we directly discussed specific developments, but certainly the matter of the fact that tensions still exist and that the necessity of preventing tensions from escalating and thereby jeopardizing the peace and stability of the region, trying to ensure an environment whereby we can avoid accidents at sea, anything which would tend to jeopardize the peace and stability are still there. And that's a very motivating reason why the ASEAN is very much trying to pursue the Code of Conduct and even now a framework for the Code of Conduct in the coming years. So I think the situation that existed last year is still there this year, and it's important that all the ASEAN countries recognize the importance of trying to come up with a Code of Conduct as soon as we can. And we think one step towards that would be coming up with a framework for a Code of Conduct.
No more follow-up. Okay, last question from Beverly Natividad of TV5.
Hi, sir. Sir, you mentioned that there will be a milestone. This will also be a milestone year for many of our dialogue partners. Sir, since the trend after the withdrawal of the U.S. from the Trans-Pacific Partnership is to coalesce with the regional partners and maybe extend that to your dialogue partners, are there more talks also with our dialogue partners for economic cooperation, or maybe revisiting some of our old agreements?
Well, as far as our dialogue partners are concerned, the ASEAN is still on track. In fact, we just recently confirmed that we will have an ASEAN-US dialogue at senior officials level in May this year, and I think that's an important step. And in fact, this is a commemorative year for the ASEAN-US relations. So as far as we're concerned, we are looking forward to meeting with the United States to discuss further cooperative activities between ASEAN and the US. Same thing with the ASEAN-EU, which is also going to have a commemorative anniversary this year, ASEAN-Canada, and also ASEAN-India. So we're still on track, in fact, to have not only dialogues with them, but perhaps to come up with some kind of commemorative activities sometime during the year. Now, each of these dialogue or commemorative activities will be handled by different ASEAN countries, whoever is the country coordinator. Philippines is presently the coordinator for ASEAN, for Canada, for ASEAN. So just let me say that we're very much on track insofar as our relations with our dialogue partners. And so we are looking forward to having meetings during the year with them at various times during the year.
Sir, just to follow up, can we expect that this year there will be more engagement with our dialogue partners? It's not only because it's a commemorative year for many of these relationships, but we need them economically and politically.
Yes, I think, our theme is engaging the world and partnering for change, and we will try to live up to the engaging the world, and that means pursuing and strengthening our partnerships with all our dialogue partners. So we hope this year will be a very active year, and I think all the ASEAN countries are looking forward to see how we can strengthen our relationship with our partners, and in fact, many of them too are quite interested. The fact that we may have some commemorative activities, and also the interest of our dialogue partners in expanding relations with us indicates that certainly there is a great need now for greater cooperation at the regional level and also between regions, our region and our partners.
Sorry, last follow-up. Sir, you mentioned that there's a SOM for ASEAN-US. Sir, what outcome, if any, are we expecting from that?
We're expecting a good outcome.
Any agreements to be had from that?
We'll see. The agenda hasn't been made, but certainly we hope to have a very productive discussion on a broad range of issues. I can't predict now we're not the country coordinator. But certainly the meeting has been set, so we're all ready and prepared to discuss with the U.S. on a broad range of issues.
Thank you so much. Closing remarks, sir?
Well, just let me say that I'm very happy to be here, and it's certainly been the beginning now of a very important year for the Philippines as chairman, but our hope is that we can live up to the expectation of engaging the world and partnering for change. And as I mentioned, we'll be very happy at our big meetings, especially to keep you abreast of developments and also to assure that we will maintain our cooperation with you, and also to invite you whenever you have any questions to approach us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So back to PTV4 and Radio Nambayan for the regular programming. Thank you, sir.